made from the simple grape with a complicated history. Can wine break through this baijiu-dominated market?
葡萄酒整个的消费市场实际上是处在一种下行的一个过程。
The first winery in China, Changyu, and it has become the largest winemaker in the country.
中国的葡萄酒工业化从张裕开始到今年有128年的历史。
Some say most Chinese wine drinkers still prefer imported brands. Is this true?
是中国的很多的品牌的葡萄酒并不差。
What about global alcohol brands?
Diageo, we were founded in 1997. Diageo is actually the world's largest international spirits company.
Whiskey culture is also seeping into Chinese culture.
Which Chinese dish, maybe hot pot, would that also go with the whiskey?
I think it really depends which type of whiskey. So even within Scotland, there are more than 130 whiskey brands.
This week, meet our special guests from Changyu Pioneer and Diageo, only on BizTalk, only on CGTN. Hello and welcome to this episode of BizTalk. I'm Lily Lu. Look around me. You would be forgiven to think that I'm in a castle in Europe. Actually, no. I'm in Shandong province, east of China, and this is Chateau Tinglot in Yantai City. China has a long history of brewing and fermenting alcohol, and drinking wine is a must during holidays and family gatherings. And today, let me take you on a journey to China's largest and oldest wine company to see how this century-old winery is coping with ever-shifting consumer habits, global competition, the arrival of new technology, and a lot more. The wine market began to take off in China in the 1990s, and China is now the world's fourth largest wine market in terms of revenue, after the United States, France, and Italy. The first Chinese winery, Changyu, was founded in 1892 by Zhang and has since become the largest winemaker in the country. Mr. Zhou, I'm really interested in Zhang, who was the founder of Changyu. So he had never done any business in wine before he started the company, and he was not even from Yantai. So why did he decide to start up a wine company here?
因为张弼士先生呢，他那个时候是作为清朝驻新加坡的这个总领事，酒会的时候就有人告诉他，这个烟台这个地方，中国的烟台是适用于这个酿造这个葡萄酒的这个葡萄的种植，发现这个地方的气候啊和波尔多那个地方比较一致。这个张弼士先生呢就对葡萄酒非常的这种感兴趣啊，然后呢就专门乘船啊就来到了烟台来进行考察。那么他最终呢决定就在烟台创办了这个企业。
所以像这里我们走过的这些旧的桶，都是在这里已经有几十年的历史了吗？
这些桶应该说是在50年代进的。
50年代进的
啊，我们待会儿能看到前面这3个大桶，那3个是建这个酒窖的时候，在这个酒窖里边组装的。
所以我们可以说，就是张裕的整个的发展历史，差不多就是中国的一部酿酒制造业的一部发展史。
应该是这样，不光是对酿酒，而且对我们这种实业的这个兴邦，这个应该说是一个记载，应该是个大事情。
Now these 3 giant buckets have been here since the cellar was built in 1905. So those buckets, along with the cellar, are the witness of more than 100 years of history in China. And being here, it feels that time stands still. In the cellar, which is now the largest and oldest in Asia, Chairman Zhou tells me about Changyu and the Chinese wine industry. Mr. Zhou, we know that China has a long history of brewing and drinking wine. So as time flies, what do you see, what have you observed in the change of the consumer group and consumer behavior in China's wine consumers?
虽然我们也听说过这个唐朝的这个诗篇，有葡萄美酒夜光杯这样的诗句，但真正的作为工业化生产，这历史相对比较短的。那么张裕这个建厂以后啊，应该说葡萄酒在中国的消费，这个还是属于一个奢侈品的。中国的葡萄酒消费还不是很成熟，消费的蛋糕 整个的总量还不是很大。国际上有个数字，按照国际人口和每年国际的葡萄酒的这个消费量，那么人均呢大概在6升，中国呢平均下来不到1升。那么还有一个数字也能看出来，和中国的白酒相比，我们中国的白酒和葡萄酒每天大概有个统计的数字，每天我们开白酒的话，一斤的容量，每天能打开4200万瓶。中国的葡萄酒消费的葡萄酒大概每天是350万瓶，当然它是700毫升的。总的来评价就是中国的葡萄酒市场还是虽然是消费量总量还是在国际上能排得上去，但是人均水平很低的。那么另外呢，我们也发现市场营销当中市场上一个现象，这个伴随着我们80、90、00后的这种成长，越来越多的这个年轻的消费者对我们的国家的这种文化的自信、产品的自信，随着这个年轻的这一代的崛起，也给我们这个这样的头部企业提供了这样市场的机会。也就是说，你有这样的适配产品，你能满足他们的需求，你的产品能满足他的价值的追求，他们也会来相信购买中国自己产的产品。
The global wine market has witnessed steady growth over the years and was valued at $354.7 billion in 2018. It is projected to grow 21% by 2023 to value over $429 billion. Despite several popular Chinese wine brands such as Changyu Pioneer, the majority of wine consumers still prefer imported brands. In 2019, China was the fourth largest wine importer in the world after the US, UK, and Germany. Do you think this relatively low consumption level represents greater market potential? And in the meantime, how would you help Chinese consumers to raise their brand awareness and also confidence in Chinese local-made wine?
改革开放以后呢，特别是在90年代的时候，中国葡萄酒就发展比较迅速，特别是以红葡萄酒为代表的。那么近10年来呢，这个我们这个开放的这个大门不断的打开，再加上这个行业呢，像对很多的国家呢都实行了零关税，那么很多的国家的产品啊，这个都进到中国。有句话说，要不已经到了中国市场，要不就是在中国这个进入中国市场的路上，几乎全世界知名的品牌和知名的葡萄酒的产区都在进入中国。当然这里边也有良莠不齐啊，这个再加上我们消费者这个也难以区分什么叫好葡萄酒和不好的葡萄酒。
Could you give me more evidence or examples to help me to understand how competitive is Chinese wine in the global market?
应该说，坦率地讲，中国本土产的葡萄酒从总量上，在全球生产量不是排在前面的。那么在它的质量应该说不属于最好的、最顶级的吧，但是也不是属于最差的，应该是属于这个属于走在前列的吧。特别是近几年以张裕为代表的，也包括其他的行业的其他的产品，参加很多国际的知名的酒展，到国际上去亮相，那么获得了很多的好评。那么我们公司的产品呢，也出口到欧洲。大家知道，欧洲是葡萄酒的这个叫号称是老世界的这个地区。我们在德国啊，在英国啊，也包括在米其林餐厅啊，这一切都足以说明质量是不差的。因为中国给人的印象是一个白酒的一个国家，而不是一个葡萄酒的国家，这有一个消费者的心智的问题。我想这需要一个时间，需要一个过程。
In 2018, the retail sales of wine in China came up to almost $74 billion and was forecasted to reach nearly $123.6 billion by 2022. Profits of Changyu is estimated to reach 500 million yuan in 2020, that is a 50% decline from the previous year due to the pandemic. But still, Changyu is the best performer in the wine industry, as other Chinese wine brands are still struggling from losses. You talked about how your consumer group is now shifting to the post-80s, the post-90s generation, and even Generation Y. So catering to a younger group of consumers probably means that you will be switching to digital sales platforms. What is Changyu Pioneer doing to cope with that?
是这样的，这个我们这个百年品牌确实存在着一个年轻化的问题。我举一个非常简单的例子，前段时间一个设计公司设计一个包装，被我给枪毙了。后来我的女儿有机会见到了这个包装，她非常棒，她是90后，所以后来我发现这是一个非常好的非常对我们有挑战性的一个问题。另外对我们这个传统性的企业，数字化的转型，要么就转，要么可能未来可能就不能说要关门，可能就要走下坡的。所以说我说数字化转型是我们必须要做的，而且要做得更好。所以说我们在今年的这个疫情，我们就加快了这个数字化转型的步伐，就全方位的数字化。现在肯定我们在产品，现在我说好多的产品的这种研发团队，并不是按照原来这种程序的，一定要董事长和总经理，因为董事长、总经理已经是60后了，60后、90后，现在实际上在很多的认识上已经不一样了，是吧？应该交给更年轻的人，或者说创新，而且要容忍失败，可能要失败掉。
Going global. In 2018, China exported around $364.5 million worth of wine. However, wine import value in China was nearly 7 times greater that year. So, what is Changyu's plan for global expansion?
我们有一个非常这个优势吧，就是我们2013年，我们陆续在西班牙、法国，还有智利、澳大利亚，我们控股收购了几间葡萄酒公司。我们对葡萄酒的每个主要的品牌都有个酿酒师的团队，有品牌酿酒师，有葡萄酒、白兰地、白酒，再加上有这么一个国际上一个交流的一个平台，这个实际上他们的技术，工艺都是和国际上都同步的。
In the past few decades, Changyu was trying to establish your brand as an international company, international wine company. But in recent years, you're trying to play this card of emphasizing on that you are a locally made Chinese wine company. Is this a hard thing to do in your brand strategy?
张裕的国际化，我想还是坚定不移的，因为这个行业是个国际化的企业，国际化的行业，实际上是非常激烈的了。但张裕的国际化，我们可能。一方面我们做好我们张裕自己的一些品牌下的产品，包括走向国际，迈向欧洲，特别在高端市场，我们现在取得了非常好的实际上是在国际上，我们也是以高来带低的，还有我们的白兰地也已经卖到了德国，我们的 XO 也已经出口到德国，今年的疫情出口到德国，这是很不容易的，未来我想这样一个市场的这种整合。也会促进我们这个品牌的这种国际化。
Having a glass of wine or brandy or two, in my opinion, is the best beverage to cheer your friends and families with just the right amount of alcohol and the right amount of fun, of course. Having heard the story of a Chinese winery going global, let's now go check out how London-based Diageo is setting out its ambitions in the China market. But before I go, let me remind you that overdrinking is not good for health.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. BizTalk, only on CGTN. Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Whiskey, the golden nectar, comes from Scotland and now runs in China's liquor market. In a bar like this one in downtown Shanghai, you wouldn't have any problem to find a cold one, be it a whiskey or gin or a fancy cocktail. With a rising appreciation of imported spirits in China, this market has never been more lucrative for international spirits producers. But has it been a smooth ride to promote sales and also different kinds of drinking culture in this baijiu-dominated market?
Diageo is a global leader in alcohol beverages. It was founded in the year 1997. The company has a large collection of over 200 brands across spirits and beers. Diageo products are now sold in 180 countries at almost every price point.
Mark, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And let's talk about spirits. We know Diageo has an exciting lineup of collections, and compared with the histories of some of the brands, the company itself is relatively young. You were founded in 1997, already, however, ranked as the biggest alcohol beverage company in the UK. How did you do it?
You're absolutely right. Yes, Diageo, we were founded in 1997, and Diageo is actually the world's largest international spirits company. We are blessed actually to have an amazing portfolio of brands within the Diageo corporation, and these brands will be, some of these will be famous all over the world. Brands like Johnny Walker, brands like Tanqueray, brands like Guinness, brands like Smirnoff. If I take Johnny Walker, for example, founded by John Walker in 1820, or Tanqueray, founded by Charles Tanqueray in 1830, Guinness even older, from 1759. These brands have been around for generations and loved by consumers all over the world over many, many years.
Drinking culture is a very tricky thing. It's very interesting, sometimes could be very tricky. Do you think the Chinese people's whiskey drinking culture is different from the Western people's whiskey culture?
China has an amazing history with various types of alcoholic beverages, and particularly you mentioned baijiu. Of course, baijiu is really a huge part of the alcohol culture here in China. Baijiu actually is more than 90% of the spirits market in China even today. So when we talk about our amazing brands and we talk about things like whiskey and gin and vodka, of course in China today these categories are growing very fast, but still relatively small in terms of annual penetration. Not only do we have a wonderful portfolio of our international spirits, but through our 63% equity ownership of Sui Jingfang, we're actually the only international spirits company to participate in both the baijiu category and also in the international spirits category.
Although whiskey can be produced anywhere in the world, Scotch is a protected status, granted only to whiskey distilled in Scotland and matured there for at least 3 years in oak casks. Established in 1820, Johnny Walker has become the world's best-selling Scotch whiskey.
Can you tell me a little bit more about Johnny Walker?
The brand was founded in 1820 by John Walker. John Walker was actually a tea blender. He started his career blending tea, not whiskey, but he used his tea blending skills to start blending whiskey. And the reason he did that was to make the best quality whiskey that nothing could ever come before it, nothing could ever beat it. And I think that's why Johnny Walker, if you look back through decades of history, it is the world's most awarded whiskey brand, and it is also the world's most recognized whiskey brand. Now in China, As I said, the consumer penetration relatively is still quite small, but it's growing very fast and the opportunity is very, very big.
So in China, how do you promote a drink from Western, let's say, for instance, Johnny Walker from Scotland, but how would you promote this in a Chinese culture?
I think the key is around education. We have to remember that although we can trace the origins of a brand like Johnny Walker in China back to 100 years ago, actually, but in terms of real adoption by Chinese consumers, a category like whiskey will probably only have something like about 20 years of history. And that's very short when you compare that to thousands of years of baijiu history. So education is very important. Telling people the story, the culture of whiskey, how to drink it, how to appreciate, and letting people discover it and then appreciate it for themselves is very, very important.
If I ask you, would you say which Chinese dish, I don't know, pork, shrimp, whatever Chinese people love most, or maybe hot pot, would that also go with a whiskey?
For sure, for sure. I think it really depends which type of whiskey as well. So as there are many, many different types of Chinese food, there are also many, many different types of whiskey. So even within Scotland, which is a very small country actually, there are over 130 different single malt distilleries, and of course over more than 130 whiskey brands. Some of them have a more heavy peaty flavor, smoky flavor. Some of them have a slightly sweeter flavor, a more fresh fruit flavor. So if you're looking for something to go with a particular spicier type of food or something with a sweeter type of food, all different types of whiskies that you can try. At the end of the day, it obviously depends on personal choice. I particularly like the taste of, say, Talisker with oysters. I particularly like the taste of Singleton and Blue Label with Cantonese food.
Oh, really? I should try that too with Cantonese food. From grain to glass, how's whiskey made and why could it become so expensive? Okay, Mark, I know that some people think that whiskey is a collectible asset. Tell me, how crazy can the price go?
Crazy.
Really?
The thing about whiskey is that a lot of whiskey can age for a very high age. So you can have 12-year-old, 15-year-old, 20-year-old, even 30, 40, 50-year-old. And you imagine it's very difficult to predict 30 years ago or 35 years ago, the demand is going to be how big. So actually, one thing which is a struggle for the whiskey industry right now is that the high age stock is actually more and more limited. The other thing that we see is particularly in China, there are a lot of people interested in buying their own cask of whiskey, because when whiskey is made, it's aged in an oak cask, and each cask is unique. And if there's a very rare, very high aged old whiskey, for someone to buy the whole cask, these things can go into several million RMB.
Have you seen many Chinese now interested in investing in whiskey? And would you say that age is the most important thing if they want to place an investment?
Is age important? For investment purposes, yes, it is one of the most important things, but also the distillery. If you can find it, something from a distillery which no longer exists, because some distilleries, particularly in the 1980s, were closed, and so all of the whiskey that they produced now has a finite amount of supply. And so when you literally consume one bottle, there is one bottle less in the world.
From January the 1st, 2021, baijiu, China's famous distilled spirit, will officially be called Chinese baijiu in English. The world's most populous country now accounts for 1/3 of the world's total consumption of distilled spirits. In a baijiu-dominated market, how can imported spirits gain more market share in China? All right, tell me a bit about what you have observed in the shifting trends among consumer behavior.
So in the very early years, going back maybe 10, 15 years ago, very much consumers who maybe have a bit more international exposure, maybe studied overseas, returned back to China. But I think that's also changing now as the penetration becomes a little bit more mainstream. Still a lot of opportunity ahead to grow that. But I think that's another change that we're starting to see as well.
Asia represents a third of the global consumption of alcohol. But when we talk about drinking, maybe it's best to drink better, not more. In a market where almost everything has gone online, how are international spirit dealers taking on this trend here in China? Let's talk about this, because your consumers are becoming younger, which means you probably will be shifting more to digital sale or selling platforms. What have you been doing over the years in this digital transformation?
And certainly we are seeing now, because of the growth of e-commerce, digital commerce online, you know, the weighting and the growth of that channel is also helping to drive more in-home consumption, smaller groups of, you know, younger people getting together. Proportion of our online sales has gone from single digit a few years ago to now a double digit contribution. Yeah. In the last few years.
Especially during the pandemic, probably, because when bars were closed, things was kind of tough in the moment. So did you find that digital selling platforms sort of saved the day?
Oh, of course. During that period, particularly last year, 2020, from February to sort of April, May period of time, when a lot of bars and restaurants and things were closed down, then of course digital was in you know, very accelerated growth at that time, as people were consuming more in home. We still see that strong growth in digital, so I think that triggered to some degree an adoption of spirits consumption in home, and I think that growth is still strong, even coming out of the worst of the pandemic. Hopefully it will still continue to be controlled well, of course, by the society.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. BizTalk, only on CGTN.
...2020 was a hard year for bars and restaurants given the COVID-19 pandemic. In July 2020, Diageo launched a support program called Raising the Bar globally to support the recovery of bars and restaurants. And in China, the company provides 14 million yuan to support bars and restaurants in 6 Chinese cities. The program includes providing hygiene supplies, equipment, training, and social media promotion. As consumption bounced back quickly in the second half of 2020, this program can well be the little boost that industry needs.
Imported spirits are not typical alcoholic beverages for Chinese consumers during the Chinese New Year, but Diageo definitely has an ambitious plan for this holiday season in 2021. What exactly is it? And finally, the Chinese Lunar New Year. What do you expect of your sales?
We have to first of all remember that we're not out of the woods yet completely from COVID. I think even recently there's been a few more sporadic cases, and we are seeing numbers increase. So I think safety is first, and I think that that should always be the most important. But I do, at the moment, from what we see as of today, we see that the market is quite buoyant, it's rebounding, and I hope that will continue, of course, into Chinese New Year.
Okay, thank you very much. Slangjiva.
Cheers.